Welcome to the Mixology Talk podcast. I'm Chris.
And I'm Julia, and we're the folks behind abarabove.com, the ultimate resource for craft bartenders, bar operators, and pretty much anybody else who's looking to make tasty, tasty drinks.
I'm a bar consultant with over 10 years hospitality experience.
And I run abarabove.com, where we publish weekly articles and cocktail recipes to help you make delicious drinks and to build your career behind the bar. This is episode number 121, and this week we're actually starting a multi-episode series where we're going to be talking a little bit about the process of starting out looking for a job in bar management. As a bartender, you might be looking at bar management as something you want to move towards in your career, but we're going to talk a little bit more about the process, both in terms of do you really want to become a manager? What's the job like? What is it actually like on a day-to-day basis? All the way through the process of actually getting hired. So let's get started, shall we?
So the first step in this process is to figure out if you actually want to become a manager. I know in kind of corporate world that's seen as a progression, not only in skill sets that you have to learn, but also pay as well. That is not always the case when it comes to restaurant and hospitality industry.
This is something that really surprised me because I've always been, my background is totally corporate, full disclosure.
Yeah.
And it was very much, you start as an individual contributor, you get promoted to things like lead and, advanced and job titles like that don't really mean anything. And as you got promoted, you got paid more. And then at some point you got promoted to manager. And what that meant was that you were in charge of other people. And it was usually a big step up in pay and a big step up in responsibility and frankly, prestige.
Right.
I don't really feel like that's the same way in the hospitality world.
Well, there's definitely some more that you get along the same road, same lines.
I think you get prestige.
You definitely can, a business card, tastings, and, and there is a lot of skill sets that you do have to develop as a manager. So there are a lot of benefits, but unless you're going forward and using this as a resume builder or to further your career, it could actually hurt you financially considerably.
Yes, it definitely can.
Yeah, I remember when I took the jump from bartender to bar manager, I lost a good amount of money. And
Absolutely.
It was really, really shocking to me. And I think this is more the norm than the exception.
It's the story I've heard so many times.
Yeah.
I think you go from being in an environment where you're being paid hourly plus tips to being in an environment where you're being paid salary. And not only are you being paid a sort of a locked in amount, but the expectation of your hours is much, much longer. And not only that, but you're not done till you're done.
Right.
You don't get to just leave because your shift is up.
Yeah, and your time commitment is going to be a lot more than they even tell you. They say, yeah. I remember when I was interviewing, they're like, oh, we really like to have managers have a work-life balance, and that sounds great, but what that actually means is if you get your stuff done, you're proactive, then you can leave as soon as the job's done, as Julia mentioned.
Right.
But usually what that means is, you can't leave until the last person's out. That means you have to be there and make sure that the bar is running well, and you come in your days off sometimes and make syrups and production, all those things, unless you have full systems in place. So you're kind of the last stopgap for that bar program. So your hours will really depend on how well you are at setting up systems.
And you may not have the ability to truly set up all those systems yourself.
Right.
So, and I don't think we want to talk down on the management role. I think it can be a fantastic role in the industry. And frankly, we all need managers.
Yeah.
I think it's an important role in the industry. But I think from your own perspective, it's important to think about it as more than just a step up in your career in terms of prestige. Think about it in terms of what it's going to be like on a day-to-day basis. Is it a stepping stone to something you really want for your career? Or are you looking to make more money? Because if you're looking to make more money, if that's like your number one thing, this might not be the way to go.
It's not the way to go.
It's not the way
unless
to go.
you really stand your ground, you provide, a very upfront conversation in the beginning, even before you, take a job of, look, this is what I make. This is what I need to survive. I can't take this job for less than this. We can figure this out. I'm open to different ideas. But if you stand your ground as far as your income goes, I was talking to Jennifer Collio on her last podcast episode about this, and her and I had a lot to say about this particular subject. And if you create a case for why you're worth this much money and really stand your ground, you're going to do yourself a lot better in the long run.
That was mixologytalk.com/120.
120.
If you want to listen to that one and you didn't catch it, that's a great conversation.
Yeah.
And we can talk a little bit more about this process when we get to probably the next episode where we're talking a little bit about hiring and negotiation. But for now, it may not be worth the effort if you're looking to definitely make more money and you don't want to work long hours and all this stuff. Then maybe stop listening here. Maybe skip ahead a few episodes.
Yeah, and there are some good things to be said about bar management. Like I said, if you're a career bartender, you're looking to own your own restaurant, you're looking to be a general manager, you're going to start to go up that chain. Absolutely, it's worth it. I'm so glad I was a manager for as long as I was, because the skill sets that I developed were so important as a business operator and owner, that you start to understand data and numbers, and it really does kind of transcend industries. So it's there is a ton of value in it. Don't think we're talking down on it.
Right,
because,
exactly.
we're definitely not
negative.
trying to, but you gotta weigh your options.
And
it's going to be a good move for you.
I would say there is kind of a half step. Which, I mean, maybe it's a little bit of a cheat and you kind of need a bigger bar to have this opportunity. But if you're not 100% sure that you're into management, but you really do want to dip your toe, consider looking for a lead bartender job. It's kind of, would you agree it's a half step?
Yeah, I would say that. You get some insight, you get some input on the menu and design and
you're probably not going to see a lot of P&Ls.
Probably not, but you can start to work around things like costing and take a look at inventory numbers and stuff like that. So it's a way to kind of get introduced into the language and the skills of being a bar manager without all of the time commitment and taking that pay cut.
Right, because typically lead bartenders are paid similar to bartenders.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, if I remember correctly, you had a lead bartender role at one time, and you just negotiated a couple extra dollars an hour.
Right, exactly.
On top of your normal tips. So, I mean, it was kind of a win-win.
It really was great.
So consider that. If you're not sure, consider looking for that. Now, I know not every bartender has this role. Not every bar has this role. But you're more probably likely to find it in a larger bar, a larger craft-style bar.
Right.
It might be a good half step if you can find it.
Absolutely.
So that being said, you got this far and you're still interested. Now we can start to talk about what happens next. So the very first step is what I like to call preparing to prepare. A lot of people like to say, I'm going to apply for a job. I'm going to open up a blank Word document, type my name at the top, and start writing a resume. That's like the hardest way
It's
to go.
hard.
It's really hard. Hopefully, first of all, you already have your last resume, your last copy. That's a really good place to start. If it's your very first resume ever, then you can start with a template or something like that. But before you even get to that point, start thinking about what is going to go on that resume.
Right, and it's going to be a little hard. It was very hard for me to put all these things about me on a resume. It kind of feels a little bit like, look how great I am. Yeah, exactly. Sorry, I'm a little bit congested. I apologize if I sound like I got a couple of wet napkins in my nose.
He does.
But it can be a little difficult talking about yourself in this and put yourself in the spotlight, in a really good spotlight. But that's really what a resume is for. It's about bragging about yourself. It's about putting your best foot forward to stand out from everyone else applying for the same job. So, just take that to heart. The best possible way, in my opinion, is to show actual numbers.
Oh, yeah, no
when
question.
You get into management and get into talking to owners and general managers, numbers are everything. So if you can say, hey, by the way, when I was lead bartender in charge of this cocktail program, I was able to increase our annual revenue by $30,000. That's going to be a giant flag for me if I was a hiring manager. Like, really, tell me more about that. So you want to kind of put things in there to open up conversation and show you in a really good light.
And I think as a bartender, sometimes it can feel like you don't have a lot of numbers behind your job because you show up, you serve guests, you go home. I'm totally oversimplifying, but there are numbers there. I mean, things like how many guests are you serving per hour? How many drinks are you serving per hour? Are there any metrics that you've increased? Did you contribute any cocktails to the menu that perhaps had better margins than what was there before?
Yeah.
There's a lot that you have contributed, even if you don't think so.
Like a training program. I know this is very common. If you train some new bartenders, put that in your resume. Say, I was in charge of 3 people, a small staff or whatever, and our nightly revenue was, we would ring in $3,000 per shift. So having those
That's
things,
impressive.
yeah, exactly. So having those numbers and that kind of experience to talk about is super, super valuable. And
Yeah.
look for those little things that you can talk about and put them on your resume.
I genuinely don't think that you can work behind the bar for any length of time without doing a bunch of stuff that's going to look great on a resume. Like Chris said, you're going to have to train a new guy.
Right.
You're going to, at some point, I hope you're going to have an opportunity to contribute to the cocktail menu. There's a lot of things that can really look good on this style of resume. So don't get disheartened, I guess is what I'm saying. If you can't think of it right off the bat, go ahead, bring a beer to the shower and daydream for a while. Like it'll come to you. Like just think about what are all of the parts of your job. Think about a day in the life. The next time you go to work, look around. Look at all the things that you're doing, the people you're talking to. Did you get more regulars? Were you able to increase? We used to have about 2 regulars a week, but now we have 7 because of X, Y, and Z. Or
Right.
I mean, that's pretty cool. Now maybe you were only a part of bringing on those regulars, but it happened on your shift.
Right.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That's a number.
That and production, like in charge of syrups and contributing to the cocktail menu, like all these little things, they really do add up to tell a story. And that's what you're doing. You're trying to tell a story.
Right.
So think about all those things you do on a day-to-day basis. If you got so annoyed with everything being so disorganized behind the bar that you put together a par sheet or an order sheet, that's something that goes on there. It shows leadership.
Yeah.
It shows like initiative. And you're not pointing and looking at somebody else to do it for you. So all these things really will help you kind of stand out. Now, the other thing to kind of really start to get in line and kind of prepare, as Julia mentioned, is getting references. Start to reach out to your network, people you've worked with, and say, hey, by the way, heads up, I'm looking for a job. You and I worked really well together. I'd love to use you for a reference.
Definitely. And I think a lot of people wait till they've written their whole resume, they've taken weeks and weeks and weeks, and at the end they go, oh shoot, I need references. And they leave it to last. And that's really annoying because when you send that text message and you haven't heard back in 2 weeks, you just set yourself back 2 weeks. Do it at the very beginning because let's be honest, it's going to take like more than 2 hours to put together your resume. Start with getting your references lined up, and by the time you get to that part of your resume, you're already going to be good to go. It's worth doing. And I mean, in this industry, I feel like we all know so many people that you shouldn't have too much trouble. But
Right.
I mean, where would you start if you were looking to add references for your resume?
Oh, I would probably just go down the line of people I've worked with in the past. Chefs would be a good place as well. Like I said, one of the people I always kind of talked to was a pastry chef. So I'd bounce ideas off them, so I would put them on for that. Any manager that I've worked with in the past. And the key to remember about references is you want them to be professional references. You can't put your Aunt Margaret on there because
Even
I'm not going
if
to call
she's
your
a
Aunt
bar
Margaret.
manager.
Right, because she's not going to say anything negative about you. Like I really want to understand who you are as a person. What are some of your what are some of your strengths? What are some of your weaknesses? That kind of stuff. And Aunt Margaret, as charming as she is, I'm sure is not going to say anything negative about you. So just make sure they're professional references if you can.
Now, when you're starting to reach out for references, do you ever have the concern that you're basically putting up a red flag that you're like, hey, I'm looking for another job?
Yeah, I mean, you want
How
to
do you
be
play
discreet
that? Yeah.
about that. And this is something to be concerned and kind of think about as you're going through this process of preparing to prepare is at what point do you let the cat out of the bag, right? So, if you're looking internally, I think it's okay to start getting these things lined up.
Sure.
If it's the same restaurant you're working at now, and there's a position that's been posted, everybody knows that somebody's going to apply for this position, so it's not that big of a deal. But if it's a different restaurant, a competing restaurant in the same city, you got to be careful how you play these games.
But everybody else has done this before.
Right.
I think for the most part, people are pretty discreet. Like, nobody's going to be like, oh, you're looking for references? Let me post this on Facebook.
Actually, hold on. I got a
Oh, no.
decent story for you. Not decent story, but something to keep in mind.
This can't be good.
So LinkedIn is not a big professional network for bartenders.
Not for bartenders.
But there's always a flag that gets raised whenever you update your LinkedIn profile. It's the first thing that happens when you go out and look for a job. So if your LinkedIn friends are part of the LinkedIn network with the people you work with, be careful because they see that you've updated your page.
It's a flag.
It's totally a flag.
So if you don't want anybody to know, well, I mean, ideally, you like go back in time and update it 6 months ago. But I mean, if you don't want anybody to know, maybe what do you hold off? I don't know.
Well, and I don't think LinkedIn is a very important network for bartenders. But just
my gosh,
be
do
careful.
they send a lot of emails?
Oh my God,
You
the
know
emails.
everybody in your network is going to get emailed about like Joe Schmo updated his
Right.
his job description.
So just
Something to think about.
Yeah, just something to think about. So
I think we covered preparing to prepare.
mhm.
I think it's a good title. I think it's good. I think the next step is something that is both obvious and not so obvious. And the first part of it is obviously preparing yourself on paper. So write your resume. I think at this point you've got some good stuff to put on there. Like I said, if you're starting from scratch, just Google resume templates. There's 1,000 of them out there, and even like bartender resume templates. There's so many of them out there. I think they're great. Do we even have any templates?
I don't think we do. I think we've referenced a couple in the past.
Yeah.
Maybe we can put that in the show notes.
We'll put a link in the show notes. I'm not sure if it's going to be ours or somebody else's, but we'll definitely put a template in there. And so don't start from scratch. It's harder that way. What should people not include on their resume?
I don't know. Like for me, if I see a picture of somebody on their resume, it freaks me out. Like there's been some pretty
Especially if it's like a glamour
gratuitous pictures in there that I'm like, are you trying to date me or is this like a resume for a job? Like there've been some pretty terrible ones. Like I'm old school, so maybe that's something new and modern and that's how people get jobs. I think in Japan it's kind of almost required.
I think there's definitely some cultural bias there. In the U.S., at least in our market, it is not normal. And what it tells me is that you consider your appearance one of your better qualities.
Right.
That's not necessarily a good sign. Like to me, I don't know. Like I hope there's more under the skin.
Right.
Above. That was totally what I was going to say. You took my answer.
No, that typos.
Oh, yeah.
Read through your resume. If that little red line in Word starts to squiggle, it means you did something wrong. Either grammar or that you messed something up.
Yeah.
Fix it.
Yeah.
I know bartenders is one of those things, is a word that comes up. I get it, but, that's...
Right-click, add to dictionary.
Right.
That's all I got to say. Right-click, add to dictionary.
Complete sentences, just like normal formatting. I mean, don't worry so much about the style as you worry about the content. It's so much more important.
Have somebody else read it, even if it is your mother.
Yeah.
Or your
I can't tell you enough. Like,
it's so when you're reading your own voice, you hear it in your voice.
Yeah.
And you hear what you mean to say, not what you actually said. I
Right.
can't tell you how many times I've missed a like the or an or a, like you miss a word, or you have somebody else read it out loud in their own voice, and it sounds not just terrible, but like either braggy or wrong, or have somebody else read it, somebody who is going to be discerning and not just tell you yes, it's wonderful.
Right.
It's so important because no matter how many times you read it, no matter how closely you're looking at it, you're gonna read it you're gonna read what you wanted to say.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things for kind of proofreading through your resume, a thesaurus is your best friend.
What's another word for that?
I don't know. It truly is your best friend.
Yeah.
Like, make those common words stand out. So start to replace them with a little bit more buzz-sounding words, something that packs some punch.
Yeah.
It really adds up, in my opinion. Don't use them wrong, but start replacing them and making them a little bit of a richer read. So that's a good one for me as well.
What about email addresses? I know there's one that I've caught, which is like
Fluffy Kitten 64.
Yeah, cutejenny@gmail.com, or
Yeah, I think most people these days probably have multiple email addresses.
I would think so.
I would highly recommend having one that's a little bit more professional, like your name at gmail.com, if you're lucky enough to get that, or your name at AOL or Netscape.
AOL. What? Don't do AOL.
But seriously, have something a little bit more professional. You can even get your own website and get a mail forwarder.
But you don't even need to go that.
Yeah.
I mean, I would. This is my own personal thought, but like I would rather see something like joesmith@gmail.com than joesmith@thebarhe'scurrentlyworking@.com as well. You're gonna want. I would personally suggest using an independent email address as well, just because it's more likely to stay current and it kind of separates where you work now. Unless, of course, you're applying for a position at the bar you're currently working on, in which case, go to town.
Yeah. So one of the other things that I would do is really figure out the paper that you're going to work with.
Oh, yeah.
It's a very subtle touch, but it makes such a big impact. Instead of just getting normal standard white paper that you print out from the printer, take the time, go to Kinko's, get like 5 to 10 different types of paper, really nice paper, and print them out because they're going to look very different on each one.
Yeah.
And it's that little touch that really stands out. And here's a little pro tip. Most of those papers they have in stock, they have matching envelopes for. So that's was always my thing. I would have matching envelopes with the matching thing, with the matching resume paper.
Yeah. You always did. I remember it was like slightly thicker. So first of all, if you had a stack of papers, it would like almost. It would almost jump out at you, with just the thickness. But also, he would use like a very slightly cream color. So again, the color's there, the thickness is there. You can't help but notice it.
Yeah, and it actually, the paper I like to use has a small amount of like linen texture to it as well. So there's a lot of these little things kind of working. And I usually put cologne on there. I'm kidding.
Which goes really nicely with the shirtless photo.
I just rub it on me when I walk in the door.
You know, they say the scent is very memorable.
It is very memorable. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Hearts and kisses, Chris Tunstall.
Is that your Gmail address?
Yeah. Hearts and kisses.
At gmail.com.
It's terrible.
Joking aside, I've seen these at Staples. It's literally, they call it like resume paper.
Yeah.
It's in a little box. It's $13 for, 20 sheets of resume, 20 envelopes, and it's a great investment. Yes,
and be careful because when you think of printing it on there, you think of how it's going to look, but when you actually print it, it can look very different. So that's why I recommend getting a bunch of different ones to choose from.
That's a good point.
Because one's going to stand out a little bit better, and you won't know until you actually print on it. But that's a really good idea too. If you find something you like, find something in a bigger pack so you don't have to spend so much money on it.
What do you think about business cards? For people who are still in a bartending role. Important, not important?
I think everyone should have a business card. We talked about that before.
We've definitely talked about that before. Actually, I will put a link in the show notes.
Yeah, and I think they're really important. Even if you just have a conversation with somebody to build your network up, and you know of a bar you want to work at, you can leave a business card and say, hey, by the way, this, that, and the other, here's my business card. And just say, hey, if anything happens here, if you're looking for somebody, please keep me in mind.
And I'll include a link in the show notes with a lot more tips on how to do it, what to put on there. I think we even do have a template. Show notes are going to be mixologytalk.com/121.
Yep.
So last but not least, this is a huge pet peeve. Seems like everybody overlooks this when they're starting to apply for a job.
Yeah.
And it is so important nowadays. Can you guess what it is?
You're going to own this one, so go for it.
Your Facebook page.
Oh my God.
Oh my
seriously.
gosh. I know you probably set it to private or you tried, but let's be honest, like Facebook owns all of our souls and stuff gets out there.
Yeah.
It really, if some friend of yours, Sean, tags you in a incriminating photo, even though you have your profile set to private, he doesn't, guess what is now being highlighted under your profile on Facebook? Guess what's going to come up when somebody Googles you, which they will Google you.
Of course they will.
Do some house cleaning.
Yep.
Go log into Chrome as incognito. Google yourself.
Oh my God, seriously.
It's like, and seriously, incognito, because then you'll see what other people would be seeing. Google yourself. Take a look at all that stuff. By the way, if there's somebody else out there with your same name and they're an axe murderer, like that might not be a bad idea to have that in the back of your mind. Like,
that might be a question I ask.
I don't know that you put like parentheses at the top of your resume being like
not the axe murderer, the other one.
The other one. I mean, it's not a bad idea.
Right.
But I mean, joking aside, like take a look at what is showing up on Google for your name. Search for yourself on Facebook. Search for yourself on Twitter. Search for yourself on Instagram. And you could try to put everything private, but it's probably not enough.
Yeah, no, this is a big point, and I can't stress this enough.
Yeah.
If I'm interviewing managers, you better believe I'm going to look at their Facebook page. I want to see what kind of person this is that I'm about to hire. And if anything comes up, you better believe it's going to be part of our conversation. So really being very particular about your online presence and putting your best face forward is so strong. Like if somebody, I won't even tell you about all the incriminating evidence you can find on somebody's Facebook page, my own included, I'm sure. Be careful. Just be careful. Like go through, and it's extremely important to manage your online presence.
And if you think about it, post things online to demonstrate how you want to be seen
Yeah.
by the public. You operating as a manager are going to be how that restaurant is seen in public. Of course they're going to check about your online of course they are. They're hiring you to represent them, to be their face. Sorry, I'm going to get off my soapbox. Do it. So important. I say it's even more important than your resume. But.
So I have one to add to this as well, and this is kind of something to keep in mind further down the road, but start reading books. Start reading professional books now. Start thinking about all those interview questions that you could potentially be asked down the road, and start preparing for them now. One of my favorite questions is, what have you read recently about our industry to kind of help educate yourself? So start reading, start having a focus on building out answers to some interview questions. I know we've recommended a ton of books, and there's so many good books out there right now. Morgan Thaller's book is fantastic. David Arnold's book is fantastic.
We have an article about books.
We do have an article about books, but there's so many great books. I know about the restaurant hospitality world that just pick something up, start reading it, and you can talk about it.
You have one favorite hospitality book that you want.
Danny Meyer's Setting the Table.
Yep.
Yeah, it's such a great book.
That's a good one.
Anybody in the hospitality industry that has not read this book yet,
homework.
Just stop, press stop on the
pull over.
Yeah, just get the book now, read it. Thank me later.
But
it's
seriously
a really good
though,
book.
like if your hiring manager asks you that question, you come back with that book. That's gonna look good.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of the gold standard. So it's a good book to read, and you can have a conversation about it. So think about those questions that you're gonna get asked in an interview, and start preparing for them now.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're ready, right?
Yep.
So you got your resume, you got your business cards, you've cleaned up all those photos, the ones I'm thinking of, on Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff.
Tinder and Grindr.
Oh, gee.
All those sites. I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore.
That rolled off the tongue quite quickly there. So you're ready to start thinking about actually applying. We're going to finish up this episode with this kind of topic, which is like, how do you start dipping your toe in the hiring pool? I think first of all, we should definitely talk about if you are looking to move up within your current restaurant. That's that's the easy way, right?
Right,
well,
exactly.
I shouldn't say it's easy because it depends on the circumstances, but from a networking perspective, you already know everybody. Of course, for better or for worse. If you're a terrible employee, good luck with that.
Right.
That's not going to go well. But, if you're looking for, if a position opens up in your own restaurant, what do you do first?
I'd say just make it known that you're interested in a position. I think if you don't ask, they're not going to look at you.
Yeah.
Or they may approach you and say, hey, I think you'd be a really good fit for this. But make your intentions known.
Yeah.
If you're interested, say something. Pull the current manager aside, pull the general manager aside. Say, hey, I'm really interested in this, and what can I do to be prepared for this, or when can I sit down and talk to you about this position?
Yeah.
I think it would be a really good idea.
Definitely, I think that's a great idea. One thing to think about, especially in this scenario where you're looking at moving up in your own job, just a really special thing to keep in mind is if you have, imagine you're just like BFFs with all the bartenders, and then you get promoted and now you're their boss.
Yeah.
Just think about that, because if your best friends in the world are now report to you, it just may not be worth it. To lose those friendships, it might make more sense for you to look for a job elsewhere to maintain those relationships that are valuable to you. So just keep that in mind. Maybe it's worth it. I don't know. But just think about the relationships you have where you're currently working, what that would look like if you did get that job that you're looking at, and make sure that's something you really want.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is something that the hiring manager will absolutely keep in mind, is just how that's going to change the dynamic of the bar team. So you may be your own worst enemy as far as that goes.
Well, and that hiring manager may have concerns. If he knows that you're BFFs with all the bartenders, he may have concerns that you're going to be able to actually, put the hammer down if necessary.
Right.
So it might actually hinder your quest to move up.
Yeah, absolutely.
So looking outside the bar, we always say relationships are key, but relationships are key.
Yeah. You're going to beat that horse with another dead horse until they're both dead.
I think they were.
I guess they were, weren't they?
That's not a saying.
But it is now.
It is. I hope not.
I just said it though. Okay.
But seriously, your network is so important. I mean, if you want to know who knows what jobs are out there, ask a rep.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've said this number of times, but they go into so many restaurants every single day. They know what's out there probably better than most.
Yeah.
So develop relationships with them. Chefs, industry bars are a great place to start looking at for jobs. Just
industry associations.
Yeah.
I know the USBG. I think they send a weekly list of job openings.
Yeah.
Email. So I mean that's a very tactical approach, but hey, it works.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So just let it be known that you're out looking for a job. Obviously, be careful. We've talked about this earlier.
Yeah.
Right. That you want to keep it on DL, especially if it's going to cause some bad blood.
Yeah. And always talk about it in a positive way.
Right.
You're not trying to move away from something horrible. You're trying to move towards something for you.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh, I can't stand this place. I've got to get out of here. I don't know. I'm just looking for anything to get me out of here.
Right.
How does that sound versus I'm really interested in moving forward in my career. I think it's time for me to start learning a lot more about the management side of things. I'm really excited about
taking the next step. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, come on. How different does that sound?
Right.
And word gets around.
Yeah, absolutely.
You might just be talking to that sales rep. You might just be talking to your colleague, but word's going to get around either way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just really think about how your network is seeing you.
Right, and this is going to give you the inside track to any new job that get posted. You know, if you know somebody that knows somebody, you're much more likely to get a phone call and an interview, and that's the hardest part right now, right?
Yes.
Is to get in front of somebody to actually talk about the job.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to throw your hat in, you know, or with everyone else through Craigslist or some of these other job sites, you're going to have an uphill battle.
Good luck.
I remember many years ago that it was, you put a job opening up and 24 hours, I'm not kidding, there were hundreds of applicants and from all over the country, you know, that want to move to this location to get a job. And I'm not going to sit there. I don't have time to sit there and read through so many applications. So if you have that inside track, if you know somebody that can put a good word in for you, man, my voice is sounding better and better.
It's getting a little sultry. I like it. Well, I mean, this is perfect timing because this is pretty much where we were looking to wrap up this episode. So next time, we're going to pick up with what you do when you've got a few targets. You've got a couple jobs in mind that you're looking at applying to. How do you actually make a good impression? How do you approach the manager? How do you get your resume in their hands? And how do you get that interview?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I hope you enjoyed this part 1. We don't do a lot of series, so hopefully you liked it. This should have given you a really good foundation for getting started with the job search for a bar management role. Like we mentioned, next time, look forward to kind of the next step. But for now, you got 2 weeks till the next episode comes out. That should be enough time to line up your references, clean up your Facebook, get your resume sorted. I'm not saying you got homework, but you got homework, you know. So definitely stay tuned. And if you're not already watching on YouTube, you should totally be watching on YouTube.
It's a pretty great thing.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. This is the full experience here.
For better or worse.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Sorry about that. But you should subscribe because then YouTube will let you know when the next episode comes out and you can hear about the next step. So once again, show notes will be at mixologytalk.com/121, and we will catch you in a couple weeks.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
Never miss an episode by subscribing in iTunes or YouTube. And as always, check out the show notes by clicking on the right.